Well, our next speaker is Christian Oh. Christian Oh is the executive director of Kollaboration DC, which is an American organization, but a great example of ties between US culture and Korean culture. He's also the co-founder of the organization. And Christian is sort of a generalist. He has a lot of experience with all these different areas, including film in particular. So please welcome him. He's going to give you an interesting talk. Welcome, Christian.
Thank you. How's everyone tonight? You guys feeling the love of K-pop and K-drama and Hallyu and everything, right? Okay. First of all, I do want to thank the Korean Cultural Center, Adam, Mr. Lee, and everybody else who created this event, because this is a great event. Don't you guys think? Come on. And the performances, of course, were incredible as well. Coco Avenue, Dave Yoon, and you're in for a treat later with Dave Toller and, of course, Puma Shock. Who's not excited about that? My talk, I mean, I had all this stuff written out. It could be a very academic presentation, but I decided I'm going to go against that because you guys can read what I have up here. But I want to educate you a little bit because what you have to realize, before we can talk about the digital age of Hallyu, we should also talk about where certain origins behind Hallyu. So we've got everything from K-dramas, K-pop, K-cinema, but something that a lot of bloggers and a lot of people that follow Hallyu, they don't talk about K-food. How many love Korean barbecue? Come on. All right. And then you guys also see there's a lot more of these food trucks. You know, everything from the Korean tacos. You're also seeing, like I was at a restaurant the other day, and it wasn't an Asian restaurant, but they had kimchi slaw. I mean, so it's becoming much more pervasive. As you guys can see, it is actually being very infectious, the way that Korean culture and Korean aspects are now, you know, in our everyday lives. So K-food, I'm not going to really talk a lot about because you guys can easily go to Annandale or any of these restaurants and really experience and enjoy the food. But it's the other three, the dramas, the music, the movies. Let's start with dramas. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that K-dramas have been around for a lot longer than just the 90s. It really got its start in the 70s as more and more Koreans were immigrating to this country. There needed to be an outlet or an avenue to view Korean dramas. So what happened? Well, some people got smart. They created local broadcasting of Korean dramas. But more importantly, and I actually think Min mentioned this, is the video rentals, okay? I remember being a very little kid and my mother having like a shopping bag full of videos because she wanted the whole set. Just like you guys do now, episode 1, episode 2, episode 3, and then it's 6 hours later and you realize, oh my gosh, I need to go to work tomorrow. You know, it happens. But what I'm saying is it's infectious. It continues. So that those were the only two outlets. And it started in Los Angeles, but then it spread to the major cities. I mean, I grew up in a very small town in Southern Virginia. So my mom actually drove up to DC to pick up these videos. That's how fanatic she was, okay? We also realize now, not only drama fever, but there's a myriad of all these outlets for K-drama. Let's think about it. You not only have the legitimate sites like Drama Fever, Crunchyroll, but there's a lot of sites that are being filtered or what I would say siphoned immediately. Let's say you have a drama that airs today in Korea. The next 5 minutes, it's on a Chinese site like maplestage.com or Viki or some of these other ones because people want it when they want it, right? You also have to realize that you know, it's unique. It's not just Koreans that are watching this. I need to show you this first. This was one of the earliest dramas that came out in 1995. And I had friends, well, not my friends, but my older friends, who would watch this without subtitles, but they were enticed. So let's take a look at it, please. Okay, this was called moreshige, or hourglass, also translated as sandglass. And it was one of the first dramas that actually tackled a very taboo subject. And that taboo subject was this type of violence based in 1980, the Gwangju democratization movement and the Gwangju massacre. It was very taboo. But for them to portray this, this dramatization of it back then, it was like wildfire. Everybody, all of my mother's friends, they had like these viewing parties. They're like watching, going, oh, put the next video in, hurry, hurry. You know, it's just crazy fanaticism and obsession to find out what happens next. But this was based on historical events. So this type of, what I would say, buy-in that people had, especially those Korean immigrants living here, without subtitles, it was also passed to their friends who weren't Korean, going, wow, I didn't know this. I didn't know about these things that happen in Korea. Then, of course, let's fast forward a little bit. You can play this clip, please. Winter Sonata. I mean, it became a romantic peak for a lot of Korean Americans and non-Korean Americans who watched this series. When it got shown in Japan, it was one of the highest rated shows in Japan. And then what led to that? Tourism. Meaning, oh, I want to go to the places that these scenes were filmed. You know, I want to relive those moments that I saw in the video. All right? So again, it was just this relativity, this connection that people had to this particular drama. We talked about food, right? What about this one? You can play the clip. Taejanggeum, Jewel in the Palace. You know, my wife actually loved this drama because of the food aspect behind it, the old school recipes and the care and the amount of time and attention it took to make these dishes. So now let's move to K-pop. I don't want to steal some thunder that was already mentioned by both Jeff and then, of course, Dave Toller, who's going to be following me next, talking about K-pop. But we have the Chinese to thank about K-pop. Do you guys know that? You know why? In the 1990s, there was a channel, there was the only MTV-like channel broadcasting out of Hong Kong called Channel V. And normally it would only show Chinese or Hong Kong pop stars. But then they saw that Koreans were creating content. And they decided, oh, well, we need to show this. Because why? The production value was fantastic. The music was catchy with these riffs and things. Dance moves. I mean, that's how it started to get outside of China. It started to go into Japan as well. But then Japan pushed back with its J-pop, okay? And then, of course, how it's evolved since then. It's the technology that we've leveraged. But let's look at where we came from. You can play the click. This was one of the most popular groups at the time, Soteji, with this song called, you know, Na Arayo, which means I know. They were probably the first instance of what I would say like a Backstreet Boy group or NSYNC of Korea, okay? But very few people know that that song was actually in a US film in 1994. First time, but here's the craziness of it. Can we go back? Let me go back, I'm sorry. You can play this clip.
Oh no, we're fine.
This movie is called Three Ninjas Kick Back. All right? But here's the craziness of it, guys. This is why Hollywood is threatened by Korea's Hollywood, or what we call the Hollywood of the East. There's a Chinese-American main character who's playing a Japanese character who, wait a minute, wait for it, who they go to Japan, but it's a Korean pop song playing in the background. So that tells you that the American Hollywood doesn't know a thing about the differences between Chinese, Korean, and Japanese. Isn't that a shameful? I mean, that's just sad. But that song, when very few people know, that was the first instance that K-pop was introduced to the US market. It's hilarious to me. And then, of course, we've already talked about Girls' Generation, the strides that we've come. You know, Psy, I don't need to say anything about Psy. You guys all know that, right? But Girls' Generation, Big Bang, G-Dragon, T.O.P. I mean, these are all things that are just now coming into play. It's amazing. So we need to realize that then there's a gap that is bridged, and that gap is between music, there's always cinema, okay? Again, cinema started back in 1945, after the liberation, after the Korean War. There was two parties of filmmakers, ones that were very left-wing, and then ones that were very right-wing, okay? There was also the first film that was a major box office hit, The Tale of Chunyang, okay? In 1960, you know, government controlled a lot of the filmmaking, but there was a lift behind that. There was a freedom of expression that came about. And that shift of censorship moved from the government to civil organizations. But more importantly, there was also standards being set. The Grand Bell Awards, which is like their Korean version of Oscars, as well as the Korean Motion Picture Act, and a very heated issue, the screen quota system. But I'm not going to go into that. Here was one of the first films that actually came into the United States. It took somewhat of a imitation, go ahead and play it, imitation from the Japanese. You'll see why here in a minute. If you get a chance to watch it, you should. If you're a sci-fi fanatic as I am, you might appreciate it. And again, these are all Korean actors. It was shot in Korea. Okay? But look, it's our knockoff version of Godzilla. And then from the 70s to the 90s, we had such growth. I mean, amazing growth. And then filmmakers such as Im Kwon-taek or Pae Young-gyun, they began getting major critical acclaim. We were in the festival market. I mean, I got to tell you, back in 2008, I had the privilege of meeting Chae Min-sik at the Cannes Film Festival for his winning film, Old Boy. But 1999 was a critical point. Go ahead and play the clip, please. This film broke major box office records. It became, what I would say, it caught the attention of Hollywood. It caught the attention of filmmakers everywhere as to the depth, as to the story, as to the acting behind this particular film. And for those of you who don't know this film is Shiri, okay? And then more films got recognition. Old Boy, My Sassy Girl, and then the directors and production houses were starting to win major awards, and Hollywood started knocking. And then we've transpired to this. Again, this is where Korean pop and Korean cinema merge. Go ahead and play the clip, please. Who all know, who is this? Who's this main actor? There you go. So, again, Korea's being very smart on how to bridge those two worlds, cinema and pop. So, by the way, it's playing December 6th here in Centerville, if you're interested to watch it. So what's the future? Well, technology is going to prove to be a continual partner in this, as more and more utilization of social media, YouTube, Twitter, everything, Instagram, there's just going to be a constant barrage of what I would say this culmination of music, drama, and cinema. But here's the thing. I feel that there's also going to be smaller waves because I come from the Asian American perspective. I feel like there's going to be smaller waves, both here homegrown. We need Jeremy Lin's, but we also need homegrown Asian American cinema, drama, and music. Okay? We also need smaller waves from other Asian countries. There's going to be a Thai wave. There's probably going to be a Vietnamese wave. Because as their technology and as their production houses and facilities and music polishing gets better and better, you're going to see other little waves come about. So I invite you to take one moment of silence because right now they're going through a major typhoon, and that's a huge economic market for the Korean economy. So I say take a moment of silence and hope that that typhoon that's it's probably hitting there as we speak, does not demolish the infrastructures that are there. So again, that's the end of my presentation. Feel free to contact me. I've got this presentation on file if you want to read more about it, as well as really start thinking about the economic implications of Hallyu. I mean, just the money. I've been involved with a lot of the productions of concerts that are here in the Washington, D.C. area, Jay Park, BAP, for those of you who are at BAP. And then don't forget next week, Infinite. All right, so again, that's all my time. Thank you guys, have a great night.